It's really great to connect with the ABA community after some time. I understand when I last checked, we had over 200 delegates attending this seminar. And I'm really privileged to have 4 panelists counting over a century of experience in banking across Middle East, East Asia, South Asia, and Europe. I'm smiling because this is a polite way of saying there are a lot of gray hairs that will surely translate to valuable takeaways from this session to all of you. We have Mustafa joining us from Iran. I believe it's 11 a.m. in Tehran at the moment. He is, of course, a familiar figure to us and has featured as a resource person in many ABA conferences. He was the CEO of Bank Malat, Turkey, and Bank Pasagat in Iran, and a prominent lecturer in several Iranian universities. Oliver is another familiar personality to all of us. He has played a significant role as a resource person in many ABA conferences, and I can describe him as a pillar for the ABA Policy Advocacy Committee over the years. He is a leading banking personality in Austria, heading Erste Bank's Asian operations, and I think is now presently based in Hong Kong. What time is it in Hong Kong, Oliver?
Hong Kong, same time like Taipei, so it's 2:35 now.
Right, okay. And Dr. Lin is a prominent economist in Taiwan and is the present chair of the Taiwan Institute of Economic Research. Thank you very much for joining us, Doctor. So I believe it's 2:30 in the afternoon for you as well.
Yeah.
And finally, we have Jonathan Alice, the managing director of HNB and the incumbent president of ABA, who joins me from Sri Lanka. As the former president of the Sri Lanka Bankers Association, he has been a leading voice liaising with government, accounting bodies, and the central bank in defining banks' role in economic revival efforts in Sri Lanka in the last 6 months during COVID-19, which I'm sure he will share with all of you during the course of the discussions today. To those who don't know me, I am Dilshan Rodrigo, Director COO of HNB and Jonathan's deputy. I chair the Policy Advocacy Committee of the ABA. It's lovely to see all of you once again, and let me very warmly welcome all of you and now ask Jonathan to say a few words.
A very good day to you, ladies and gentlemen and friends. It's lovely to connect in this way, even if we cannot be physically present at the same location. My sincere gratitude to the Secretariat and Dilshan for putting this Zoom conference together, which was a result of a conference call or a meeting that we held with the Secretariat on the 19th of June based on feedback that we had received from the membership in terms of how do we stay engaged over the coming months with this lockdown and with the travel freeze that is in place. And there was a unanimous feedback. There was consensus that the ABA fraternity, the membership, should continue to remain engaged, understand what each other is doing in order to manage this situation, what are the actions that banks are taking in terms of the new norm that prevails now, what are the risks that are emerging in the horizon, and what each bank is doing to take preventative action, in addition to continuing with our Fintellect and other ABA hosted webinars also in order to mitigate some of the travel restricted. So we used to have these visit programs which have now been kind of stifled, and how do we still have that kind of program going on the web is something that we have discussed. So as a starting point, we thought let's have this session today with regard to what each of us has experienced on COVID, and then what are the actions some of the countries and the banking industry is taking in general. Then I look forward to the next session in September, for which we will get a feel for what kind of topic needs to be on. And then as per the minutes circulated by the Secretariat, Policy Advocacy Chair, Mr. Dilshan Rodrigo, will host the Policy Advocacy in November 2020, which we were anyway going to have as part of the conference. I thank all of you for the feedback in enabling us to now move the conference to 19th and 20th of August next year. And as a prelude to that, probably early February, we would have another policy advocacy as well as a planning meeting in order to lay all the plans for the August conference. So without taking more of your time, and in order to get into this meeting proper, let me hand you over back to Dilshan.
Thank you, Jonathan. We are today 6 months into a world operating with COVID and countries in different stages of revival. The purpose of this session is to explore how countries, governments, banks are adapting to this new normal, and ensuring the processes and that we take advantages of the opportunities available while protecting ourselves from the risks that are emerging for banks. So I would like to start off by asking each panelist to take no more than 10 to 15 minutes to cover the post-COVID landscape in their respective countries, share how the banks and economies are coping and even thriving in some cases during this time, and share learnings and best practices with us. This will be followed by engaging with the audience on a question and answer session. I think when I last checked a couple of minutes ago, we had over 260 participants. I'm keen to give them as much time as possible for this Q&A session, and then we will wrap up the session in about an hour and a half. So that is the plan. So let me start, if I may, with Dr. Lin.
I prepared some slides, but it seems I cannot use the slide. So I just describe the content I want to say. The first thing I want to mention in Taiwan, actually, the cases in Taiwan are not that many. Right now, we only have about less than 500 cases. I mean, for 23 million people, less than 500 seems can get the A+. I mean, so because the cases are few, so I can say our economy also hurt only a little bit. But my government also doing very good for the how to make the economy better, because this is a global issue, and for Taiwan, we are the small open economy. So trade is very important for Taiwan. But right now, as everybody knows, the COVID-19 hurt the whole world, and the trade shrink. So we do have some damage, but our government try the best way to help the economy. So right now, it already seems the economy are back on the right track, because people right now feel in Taiwan is quite safe. So all people come out to do the consumption, to travel, to eat in the restaurant, and only we cannot take the airplane. But that's the thing we cannot do. But the other things seems back to normal. So actually right now in Taiwan, people's life already back to normal. Of course, we know the new normal is the case by COVID-19, but in Taiwan, seems we are back to the normal. How our government help the economy, I should mention the first thing is how to help the shop, the small shops or the business. They got hurt at the first. So the government subsidized the rent, the usage, the utility expense, and some also subsidize the salary for those shops. They cannot earn money. So the first thing government do is to subsidize the business. Then our government try to use the interest rate, interest subsidy for those business who apply for a loan. Because in Taiwan, we are kind of doing the indirect finance more than the direct finance. That means the business, especially for the SME, they cannot issue their bonds or their stocks is not popular for the SME. So most of them got the finance from the bank. So interest rate or interest is the burden of the shops or the SME. So our government do have some subsidy of the interest to help them to pay the loan. And of course, we also extend the loan if they cannot pay their interest on time. So in this part, actually, is a big part of money because for total of our government help money is 1.25 trillion, but for the loan part is already almost 0.72 trillion. So the money to help the SME to pay the loan, that part is huge. But because of the interest should carry out subsidy should carry out by the banks. So our banks should do many things to go through this kind of help. For example, like my bank, CTBC, we try to help the SME and also the labor to bail out their loan. So we do have the KYC first to help go through the agent if they want to come to apply for a loan. But we also use AI, that means artificial intelligence, for the new technology, help to screen all the files. Otherwise, because of the application are too many, so that take a lot of time. But go through AI help, we can do very quickly to screen and to find the people's record and also their prospect. So the way to help them to reduce their interest is a very important thing to do. And also our government now is doing the stimulus package, like people spend 1,000 and to get 3,000 coupons. That means they must take their money first, take out their money first, 1,000, then they can get 3,000 coupons, and they use those coupons to go to the shops or all the restaurants or everywhere to spend the money. That means the multiplier effect should be bigger than if the government give out the money direct to the people, because people spend 1,000 and get 3,000 coupons. That they must use the coupon, and the coupon must be used before the end of this year. That means they must consume all the 3,000. That can make a multiplier effect. So this can help our economy to back to the normal. And I think the other thing I want to mention is about the government. We have the local government and the central government, they are doing things together. That means central government gives some direction, and the local government, they can perform and follow the instruction and do the things together or easier. So this is kind of way to help the economy. And then finally, I think for to help the economy, I think the next step is what the industry will be important in the near future. That means our money just not go to the people or go to the SME, but you should use the money for the next generation or for the next step. That means our government to find out 6 strategy plan to help to go through to do the next thing, next way. For example, like information and communication, digitalization. That's the first one. The second is 5G industry, because 5G is the next cellular form to use. And the third one is biotech technology. The fourth one is green energy, and then also the national defense industry and also essential goods industry. For those 6 strategies, that's our government identify what we should develop in the future. That means right now we spend the money on the new things, then our economy can develop in a better way in the future. So that's my short presentation about what our government and what we are doing now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lin. That was very useful. I mean, the key takeaways for me was the success story for Taiwan with just 500 cases, and the 3-fold strategy where massive stimulus package which had an impact on 30% of the GDP, using technology for health and safety very effectively, and also measuring the risk levels of the industry and then stimulating those industries accordingly to be future ready. I think those were the 3 key points that I took away from it. Excellent short presentation. Thank you very much. Can we now move on to Mr. Mustafa Roy?
Okay. I will cover my presentation. First, the impact of the pandemic on the Iranian economy. I can cover this area. First of all, good day to everybody. Good afternoon to all you nice people in Southeast Asia. In Tehran, it is almost 11:30 in the morning. I covered this area about the Iranian New Year holiday impact, the impact of GDP and unemployment, most affected economic sectors, and unlocking economy. In the Iranian New Year holiday, in fact, Iran has been struggling from the unilateral sanctions of the United States in the past, and the timing of COVID-19 could not have been worse for Iranian economy, because Nowruz, the Iranian New Year, is on March 21st and is the most profitable period of the year for many of the country's small business, retail stores, ground and air transportation, restaurants and hotels. This year, due to the government-imposed lockdown, practically no one traveled. Iran was closed for the Iranian New Year holidays from March 19 to April 4 and worked with 50% capacity till end of April. From about end of April or early May, most institutions, factories gradually returned full capacity. The impact on the GDP, in the most optimistic outlook, estimates the impact of COVID-19 on Iranian economy in 2017 between 6 to 6.5% contraction. Due to the downturn in the economy, there have been significant job losses in 2022, but not official figures have been yet released. In the best case scenario, the estimated economic contraction in 2020 will put 1.5 to 2 million jobs at risk, potentially pushing the unemployment rate to approximately 17%. Most affected economic sectors, small businesses, transportation industry, hospitality, construction industry, and services sector in general, which totally employs more than half of the working population, were hit the hardest. And due to closing of borders with neighboring countries, non-oil exports were completely halted in April, but restarted back to normal in June. And then we started the unlocking, the aware of these facts and worried that strict quarantine measures would immediately push an additional 10% of the population into extreme difficulty. The Iranian government left behind imposition of strict quarantine measures and started gradual ease of lockdown in May. About what the banking sectors and the government has done, the financial aids by the government, the extended loans to more than 23 million vulnerable individuals, granting financial facilities to vulnerable business sectors and households up to 4.4% of GDP. There was a cash donation to needy households, about 0.3% of the GDP. Government allowance to low-income families and aiding unemployment fund, 0.3% of the GDP. The budgetary provisions, additional budget for healthcare sector, 2% of GDP, withdraw from National Development Fund up to $1 billion for COVID-19 aid, and extending payment of tax deadlines to the government by 3 months up to 7% of GDP. Selling of government-owned remaining share in some public companies for additional COVID-19 aids were some of the other steps taken by the government. In regards to the measures taken by the banking sector and under Central Bank of Iran guidelines, extending timetable for returning proceeds from exporters by 3 months, the time allowance to them, extending repayment of foreign currency loan installments due on March, April, and May, and June 2020 by 3 months, extending timetable for importation of goods under issued foreign currency allocations prior to February 2020 by 3 months, and opening deferred payment domestic letters of credit in Iranian rials in order to extend non-cash credit to companies working within the national supply chain process, and providing financial facilities to clients, accommodation and assisting clients and business owners, especially SMEs, in repayment of financial facilities by postponing repayment of loans up to 3 months, providing financial facilities to 13 million low-income individuals, and temporary lifting of restrictions with regard to bad checks due to COVID-19. In regards to measures taken by for the promotion, another step, another activity which the banks is promoting the digitalization of their activity, increasing ceiling of fund transferred by bank cards, because there is a limitation how much you can transfer from bank card to other bank cards. So that limit was increased. Enhancing and promoting digital and mobile banking with all clients of the bank, and the banking sector has extended online payment gateways. And actions for decreasing banking staff presence at work, reducing daily working hours for all staffs to half day for 2 months, and reducing mandatory employee attendance to 50% and gradually returning to full staff on May 23, 2020, through a phase-by-phase approach as per guidelines of the Iranian National COVID-19 Supreme Committee. About the measures regarding the measures as currently being set in place as part of effort to put back the economy and the banking industry on the road recovery. There are different, different steps has been taken. The gradual lifting of the lockdowns, first with the medium run trade-off between the economy and public health. The Iranian government chose the gradual lifting of the lockdown. Many jobs were resumed gradually, low risk and essential jobs with low crowds and low traffic, such as production and industrial units, distribution, food technical and household services started after obtaining a license from the Ministry of Health and Medical Education by observing health protocols. Financial and budgetary instruments, publishing of Islamic bonds and sukuk for financing the government. Government aims to reduce budget deficit during 2020, but it was difficult under COVID-19 and it doesn't allow them to do that. Government allowance to low-income families and granting financial facilities to vulnerable people. This has been the steps taken to this purpose. In regards to introducing public health protocols, Iran has decided to implement a smart distancing, which is in line with social distancing and providing conditions for society to gradually return to normal, informing and educating people on COVID-19 virus and preventive measures via public media, development of executive instructions for the COVID-19 care system, emphasizing on using medical devices such as surgical masks, gloves, and disinfection liquids, and obligation for utilization of face masks in public place, and introducing workplace health requirements, reduction of working hours, working in separate shifts and working from distance. In fact, remote working, developing recommendations for each workplace category, special disinfection instruments for service personnel in workplaces, and examples, exempting physical presence of employee belonging to vulnerable groups. Developing guidelines for reducing disease transmission at workplace, encouraging sick employees to stay at home, separation of sick employees, protecting employees at high risk such as pregnant women and people with underlying medical conditions, and critical for return to work for infected employees. Publishing guidelines for social distance and environment and workplace health requirement in banks. There were different steps, different measures has been taken. Obligation for utilization of masks and gloves by employees and clients. Testing of blood temperature of all staff, clients, educating encouraging clients for maximum usage of the electronic and mobile banking services, and increasing ceiling on fund transfer of the bank cards. What are your organization is doing to assess your risk and vulnerability from both an operational and financial statement? The monitoring of international and local developments, continuous monitoring of international developments and global economy during this period, constant surveillance of the measures adopted by the international financial institutions, examining policies and decisions implemented by the Iranian government and its consequences on banking sector, studying of changes in customer behavior during pandemic. designing and implementing risk analysis program. Under this scenario, determining potential risks for the bank from both an operational and financial standpoint, designing relevant risk scenarios and precautions for the bank based on different political and financial parameters, preparation of risk heat map based on future possible scenarios designed by industry experts and taking adequate measures, continuous observation and updating of residual risk in all areas of activity for the bank, recording for loss events in operational risk with regard to COVID-19 in loss columns for column of our records, and risk analysis competitor banks in the domestic market. Under assessment of the health condition and financial stability of the bank and its clients, continuous assessment of the health and medical conditions of all management and staff, continuous surveillance on financial health and stability of clients, industries, and borrowers, analysis on different business lines and revenues for the bank, continuous surveillance of liquidity, cash flow, and revenue of the bank, constant monitoring of financial facilities granted and NPL of the bank, and regular comparison of the data with those of previous years. In fact, I got unfortunately, my COVID-19 test was positive and I had to stay at home for 3 weeks under that circumstances. For the what actions are you taking to mitigate risk and plan for recovery scenarios and associated impacts on liquidity? For the liquidity management, we identification, appraisal, and categorizing potential risk endangering the bank, enhancing and improving management of assets and liabilities in the bank, and further strengthening ALCO activities, improving and emphasizing management of liquidity, managing interest paid on foreign currency deposits, increasing liquidity in the bank and recovering certain assets to cash and liquid assets, preference of investment in short-term projects. These were some of the measures taken for the liquidity management. Under management of the bank's credit portfolio, upgrading the average rating of bank's credit portfolio by increasing supervision of consumption of loans by clients. Second measure was facilitating repayment of loans and financial facilities for vulnerable economic sectors due to COVID-19 pandemic, and preference for short-term lending and financial facilities were other measures taken. For arrangements to make the workplace safer for employees, these were, I already covered this, and there's no need to elaborate on that more. But coming back to how is your organization achieving business transition toward digitalization as part of its effort to adapt to the new normal brought about the COVID-19 pandemic. In fact, we have started the second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic in Iran, and unfortunately the number of deaths has been increasing. But in this regard, for more support and focus on information technology, applying artificial intelligence in banking activities as a strategic information technology. We are working very hard on this issue, increasing research and development on fields of IT and communication, and further investment in digital solutions, supporting IT and digital businesses, further concentration on cybersecurity and safeguarding of client information. And also, we do have a special plans for some of the clients which are not using smartphones, and we are trying to help them, assisting them in order to be able to use our mobile banking and other services. And encouraging employees and customers to use online services augmentation of to the extent possible, different business of banks such as procurement toward online platforms and digital solutions, extending digital and online services offered by the bank, improving electronic payment channels, including electronic wallet and face recognition system, and establishing safe network on national internet infrastructure. And the last part which I would like to cover is reducing the need for physical meetings of clients and employees by enhancing the social financial network of Bank Pasargad and related applications with objective of minimizing physical meeting with clients, such as the General Assembly meeting of the bank on July 21st, which we had it a few days ago, which so many people were participating in the General Assembly through the system which we had developed, organizing most meetings via video conferencing, aiming to lower time required for each task, minimizing the weight of clients at the branch, and altering KYC and credit assessment procedures to be conducted digitally without necessity for face-to-face meeting with clients have been the steps that they have been the measures that we have taken in order to cope with COVID-19. Thank you so much, and wishing you a good day. I'm at your disposal.
Thank you, Mustafa. That was a very comprehensive presentation that you covered. I think a lot of the things that you mentioned, particularly on the use of AI, research and development, digital solutions, I think we can explore further during the question and answer sessions. I think we are now around 12:45. We are doing well on time. I will ask Oliver to take us to the next discussion.
Okay, thank you, Dilchan, and thank you to the ABA for having me. I wish it was 7 weeks ago. I would be sitting here now very smug and tell you how well Hong Kong managed this outbreak and how everything was under control. Unfortunately, that no longer is true. Since early July, we are experiencing what we call here the third wave. We have gone from single digit or even 0 new cases per day in May and June to triple digit new cases every day now for the past, I think, 7 or 8 days. The government here in Hong Kong actually, with effect of today, has further tightened or has tightened again the social distancing measures. They have extended the travel entry and quarantine requirements. Basically, the target is to make people stay at home as much as possible without going into a full lockdown. From January to now, we have had a total of 3,000 recorded cases. 23 people have died in Hong Kong with or of the virus. So in international comparison, those are 2 very low numbers, and especially for a place like Hong Kong, where you have 7.5 million people living in very, very crowded conditions. So despite of the recent increase, I think Hong Kong still is doing relatively well. I think we can be very lucky to have a very good public and private health system here in the city. With regard to to Hong Kong's economy, that of course will be hit substantially by the virus. We're expecting GDP to shrink this year 7 to 8%. The fiscal deficits will hit probably 10% of GDP, and the unemployment rate already hit a 15-year high of 6% last month. The economy of Hong Kong is very much a service economy. Actually, 90% of our GDP here comes from services. There are four main pillars. One, the financial services, two, the transport and logistics, three, retail, and four, tourism. So the latter two already went into 2020 in a rather weak condition, because they were hit very hard by the protests we had here in Hong Kong starting from June last year. And these are also now the two sectors which are hit hardest by the virus. So what is the government doing? What are the banks doing to help or to bring back the economy on track? The Hong Kong government, in its annual budget in February, already announced a spending package of 120 billion Hong Kong dollars. So that's around 15.5 billion US dollars. On top of that, they added an anti-epidemic fund for 4 billion. And again, in addition to that, in April, they added a virus support spending package for another 18 billion US dollars. And fourthly, they launched the employment support scheme, which again will cost around 10 billion US dollars. So in total, around 47.5 billion US dollars of extra spending to fight the crisis, which equals around 13% of Hong Kong's GDP. In the finance industry, the HKMA, the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, has been very proactive. They have been very supportive towards the bank, which should enable the banks to then again support their clients. The HKMA have released almost 130 billion of lending capacity through various measures. They lowered the counter-cyclical capital buffer from 2 to 1%. They cut the regulatory reserves requirement into half. They deferred some of the Basel III requirements, and they established a 10 billion US dollar special liquidity facility by using repos with the Fed. So as an effect, the total loans of the Hong Kong banking sector from September last year to May this year increased by more than 52 billion US dollars. Specifically for the corporate customers, over 100 banks participated in the principal payment holiday scheme. There were more than 40,000 applications for this approved, worth 65 billion US dollars. The banks granted extensions of repayment periods. Trade finance lines were converted into overdraft facilities, and especially for the retail sector, an accounts receivables loans facility was set up. For retail customers, there were over 14,000 applications granted for relief measures worth around 4 billion US dollars. That ranged from principal repayment holidays on personal mortgages, relief loans to employees of hard-hit sectors, and extension of personal loan tenures. The government also gave out 10,000 Hong Kong dollars in cash, so that's about US dollar 1,300 to each adult Hong Kong resident. But I agree with Dr. Lin that the way Taiwan did it with the coupons probably made more sense and would have a bigger effect on the economy. In terms of the risks the banks are looking at and what they're doing about to mitigate them, on the operational side, I think that each and every bank here in Hong Kong has been going very thoroughly through its business continuity plan. Specifically in Hong Kong, we did that last year when the protests started. We had to do it now again, of course, under the aspect of the virus. we all had to submit updated BCPs to the HKMA. There were a lot of trips up to the new territories, to the disaster recovery sites, to make sure everything is in place and we could activate them in case in a real worst case scenario. Most banks, ours included, they have opted to split their teams and make as many employees as possible work from home. On the financial side, obviously in a crisis situation, the most important thing is liquidity. I don't think any bank in Hong Kong has had any problem in this regard. The banking sector in general is very, very healthy. The HKMA are very supportive, and they of course have some very deep pockets. The other, and I think more long-term factor in terms of what is at risk for the banks is, of course, the capital position. Again, I don't think we have to worry about any bank here in Hong Kong. The CET1 ratio is around 15%, I think, for the sector. The banks should have enough buffers and reserves to sustain any pain coming from an increase in bad loans. Looking ahead, what will help to bring Hong Kong out of this crisis back to recovery? We expect Hong Kong's GDP to grow again by 6% in 2021. Of course, that is subject to that a way is found to contain the virus or to treat the virus. It is also subject to the borders with mainland China opening up again, and let's say to the easy monetary policy to continue. There still is a lot of lending capacity among Hong Kong banks, which can be used once the recovery hopefully gets underway. The single most important factor for Hong Kong coming back to growth mode, of course, is China. Our economy is extremely closely interlinked with that of China. We can look towards the blueprint that was published for the Greater Bay Area project on what is in store for Hong Kong going forward. The role Hong Kong will play in this regard, and especially, of course, the finance sector here. We already have the Stock Connect scheme, we have the Bond Connect scheme, and most recently the Wealth Connect scheme. And I think you will see further integration with the Chinese economy and the financial system going forward. Lastly, on the question regarding digitalization, I think digitalization was one of the most used, but also one of the most misused buzzwords in the past few years. The virus, in this context, I think has had a strong effect as a catalyst for some real change and some real action. In the banking industry, I think digitalization already was progressing quite well in terms of product delivery, service delivery, customer communication. The HKMA here in Hong Kong last year issued licenses for 8 new virtual banks. So this trend, I think, will be enforced. I see a real change, or even bigger change, I see probably in the way we are working, or in the way we will work, in terms of more flexible work arrangements, in terms of using video conferencing as we do now, and video training. I think the change that we see now would not have happened at this speed and in this magnitude without the pressure of the virus. Thank you. That's it from my side.
Thank you, Oliver. Again, very interesting. I mean, what is interesting is the 3 contrasts. So you have Taiwan on a controlled decline in terms of the pandemic. you have Iran in the midst of the pandemic, and then you have Oliver, your Hong Kong. You're speaking about Hong Kong in a new third wave, a new growth.
Right.
So before we move on, I think one of the areas that you talked about is the sheer amount of money that is spent in terms of controlling this. I think it's similar in Taiwan as well. And for some of the developing countries, the affordability definitely is a factor. And another area you brought out was about BCP. I'm sure we can explore a little bit more during the question and answer sessions. So we've had 3 presentations, just one to go. Jonathan is waiting. Jonathan, appreciate your thoughts as well on these same discussions that we've had.
So once again, a very good day to all. And I'd like to thank the 3 panelists for their excellent presentations, and thank Dilshan for moderating and guiding us. So very interesting presentations as well. From a Sri Lankan point of view, I think it was a real positive in terms of when it got started, the very proactive steps taken by the government with the help and assistance of the tribe forces, the army, the police in particular, and then an excellent job done by the Ministry of Health, the health inspectors, in order to curb whatever potential that was there to kind of unfold. So we were able to contain through prevention, because Sri Lanka knew that if it had got out of control, for us to kind of manage the situation on the ground would have been a challenge. So prevention was the most important thing. So there were regular curfew for a while, and then gradually, easing. We went through periods of complete lockdown for several days and weekends in order to ensure social distancing and prevent people from congregating in any and every part of the country. So like was mentioned, the things like sanitizers, gloves, thermometers at banks, at corporates, and at every place was put in place so that you wouldn't take any chances. The government, along with central bank, with the help of the banking sector, took very proactive and immediate steps to support the industries impacted. And in this regard, it was twofold. Immediately, the banking services was made an essential service, notwithstanding transport challenges, the risk that was inherent in traveling to office and back. All staff were expected to come to office, one, to provide the cash services and other essential services to all consumers. And then secondly, the government, central bank, along with the banking sector, came up with relief schemes similar to what was mentioned. And if I am to break it up, initially it was a 50 billion rupee relief scheme for working capital, which worked out to about 2 months working capital requirements for the months of maybe April and May. This was granted to customers at 4%, refinanced by central bank at 1%. In addition, there were extensions granted on credit card, personal loan, and other payments by 2 months to 6 months, depending on certain criteria. Various other moratoriums too were granted. The main industries impacted was the hospitality industry. Sri Lanka, being an island, relies so much on tourism. In addition, again, exports being an important player has been curtailed. So with no travel and limited shipping as well, the Sri Lanka was impacted greatly by these two industries and other related ancillary supply chains as well. So in terms of further help granted in terms of financing, we have moved on to phase 2, where this 50 billion has now been increased to 150 billion, where banks can leverage their portfolios in order to get further funds at 1% and in order to provide on lend at 4% for clients who are in need. This is also complemented with a credit guarantee scheme, which allows companies with turnovers under 1 billion to avail facilities up to around 25 million to support their working capital and in order to get them started. In addition, the construction industry has been issued with commercial paper promissory notes to the value of 100 billion to create liquidity in that industry. And in addition, the government has been, the central bank has been printing a little bit of money, about, let's say, a few million dollars in terms of in order to pump liquidity into the industry. That having said, liquidity has not been an issue, whilst working capital finance has been provided at concessionary rates. The demand for credit has not been significant, which has actually seen a drastic drop in comparison to previous years. After almost 2-3 months of lockdown, what we have seen is a resumption to work from about middle of May, and we are pretty much in almost full gear now, at least most industries other than those most impacted and affected, and slowly we are starting to see credit growth as well, or the demand for credit. Deposits have grown during this time, so that also has helped the liquidity front. Things that we have learned in the process is, as part of being made essential services, is to ensure that not all need to come to work. So those who are elderly, those who are carrying certain illnesses, we did not take any chances. They were encouraged to stay at home and work from home. We made around 1,500 VDIs, VPM connections, which we are now trying to move to VDI and other more foolproof systems with tracking from the center, so that a good percentage of our staff can also work from home and remain productive. This also helps with our plan just in case a second wave comes in. We are better prepared in order to handle the situation and make sure that our clearing and our central bank payments, RTGSs and all that happens unhindered, while limiting the risk to our staff as well. While COVID was an absolute dark gray cloud, the silver lining there was indeed the digitalization possibilities. If some banks or CEOs or management had doubts as to how much should be done and how soon, all those doubts, all those strategies, all those meetings have now been shelved, and everybody is trying to digitalize their business. So as part of being made essential service, whilst we were operating, not all could reach ATMs as well as come to banking counters to obtain cash. So banks like HNB, through their apps, their Appigo WebEx, as well as their CyberSource IPG, all those came to play in order to make cashless, checkless payments, and to facilitate other essential service providers to be able to sell their products, mainly food, beverage, pharmaceutical, products, etc., HNB and the other banks who were technologically savvy and in the forefront in their digital journeys were able to contribute effectively. And in doing so, and while supporting with the CyberSource IPG and its AppyGo and various other apps, HNB also has made further inroads into its solo app, now moving into digital and bringing in more functionality and value, tying up with many merchants in order to leverage its market dominance position in the acquiring business to now move that into the QR space as well as the mobile payment space. In addition, we have also launched our digital banking layer with the first initiative of the mobile banking being launched. This also complements central bank taking proactive steps to do eKYC as well as digitally onboard pending the digital national identity card coming into play by the end of the year. So a month was given, that was extended to a second month, and now extended further in order for us to be able to onboard customers digitally. As was mentioned by the previous speakers, BCP took a greater significance in the with the COVID-19 saga taking place. In addition, we have had a closer look at our DR sites. We are looking at alternate DR sites as well. And in terms of BCP, in addition to making more laptops available, we are also looking at the various other aspects of security, as well as tracking productivity as people increasingly work remotely and free up space within the office environment so that we mitigate the risk. So our counters and all, we have used screens in addition to what I mentioned earlier in terms of sanitizers, gloves, as well as the thermometers being used at the branch. We are pretty firm in checking our customers and our staff and are not taking any chance. Constantly the government encourages people to exercise caution and not to let the current situation deteriorate, because I think the way forward for Sri Lanka is prevention. In all this, I mean, liquidity has not been too much of an issue, given that, as I said, whilst repayments have been slow in coming, neither has credit picked up, but deposits continue to flow in the absence of certain salaries being credited, but certain relief being given in terms of taxation, loan repayments, as well as certain other utility bills that could actually be delayed. But what we need to watch is over the next 2-3 months and towards the year end, when repayment starts, we need to be proactive and see how many of our customers are able to repay, which industries are more vulnerable than the others, what are the likelihood of new NPAs and stages, customers moving from one stage to another, increasing impairment, how much more HNB has played a lead role, being engaged with the government, central bank, as well as with the auditors to make sure that we manage this situation as pragmatically and proactively as possible. We will continue to do so, and we will make sure that when repayments start, that all banks will continue to see how we can continue to get repayments in, as well as continue to support customers who are in difficulty. Maybe Dilshan, I'll pause at this moment and wait for questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think you covered again a very exhaustive presentation covering how we use technology to manage health and safety, as well as to make working from home effective in the bank. Then the efforts taken by the government as well as the banks on business revival, BCP and DR, and finally the digital transformation efforts. And as Oliver mentioned in his presentation, how for banks this event has been a catalyst in terms of really upskilling and really driving the whole focus on digital transformation we have been talking about in the last 5 years. But the amount of efforts that have been taken by banks and government, everybody working together to drive that infrastructure and drive the transformation that we want would have not happened had it not been for COVID. So that's an interesting point. We can talk about that later. But just want to say thank you to all the panelists for a very comprehensive and deep thought out presentation. So I would like to now open out for the questions from the audience. But before we, while that is happening, I would like to start off with one question which I think may have not been addressed adequately in the presentations that we covered so far. So we all agree that the economic impact from post-COVID has been considerable to all the economies that we've been affected. So as a result of that, what would happen is that the more marginalized sectors, the poorer segments of society would face more hardship, and inequality will only increase. So as a result of that, there are challenges for banks to strengthen the area of cyber risk fraud, external fraud. So I would like to just open it out to all four. Maybe one of you can come up with what the kind of actions your institution has taken to reduce that risk, given this the challenge right now where people are getting more desperate, and as a result of that, cyber criminals are also getting more active, to be able to, in a digital transformation that is happening with the banks, to really look at exploiting weaknesses in the bank's systems as well as controls to be able to effect fraud. I'm opening
Dilshan,
one who would like.
Dilshan, just one comment, Dilshan. I need to get into another board meeting. If you can cover the Sri Lankan story on my behalf, please. And in addition to the question on cyber and security, if you can also cover about how we are helping people at the micro level with our own schemes and new refinance schemes we are looking to bring in order to revive the rural economies, etc. It might be of use to our colleagues and our members.
Sure, will do.
Gentlemen and ladies, if you could excuse me, I look forward to being in touch with you soon and maybe get on the webinar again in September. Thank you all.
Thank you, Jonathan. Would any of the panelists like to respond on that question that I posed on what measures banks are taking to protect themselves against cyber and external fraud?
I mean, for the Hong Kong banks, to be honest, I don't see such big of a change, because cyber fraud was an issue already before the virus. I can't say that it has increased, or we haven't seen a big increase since the virus crisis started. Of course, the risk is increased because so much more work is now done out of what you would call the safe environment. I mean, that is an issue we have with the work from home arrangements. What can be done at home is the IT security in your home as good as in the bank. There are also regulatory aspects that certain activities, like in treasury trading, they are not allowed to be done from home. So we will have to look into into that or enter a discussion with the regulator what activities can be allowed in the future to be done from home, and what are the minimum standards you would have to meet also as in your private home. In the banks themselves, the HKMA is doing the regular cyber security audits. These have been going on for a couple of years. So again, for me, not yet a big change, but you're right, the risk has increased.
Mustafa, would you like to add something there? Because the point was, when banks, are suddenly thrust upon driving digital transformation, that they are, on a scale than never before, there might be more vulnerabilities that are in systems that can be exploited by the cyber criminals.
Yes, I would like to add that in regarding to the the cyber issues, BIS recommendation, they have been giving some recommendation to the banks with increased risk associated with cyber frauds. In this area, they have emphasized on several issues, raising awareness through public statements about increasing levels of cyber crime. Second thing, providing guidance on the most relevant cyber resilience areas, information sharing on COVID-19 related threats, issuing public statements drawing attention to COVID-19 money laundering and terrorist finance threats, and emphasizing the flexibility built into the AML and risk-based framework on providing guidance on its application. These are the guidelines which have been provided by BIS, and I think every bank, they are trying to put all these issues on their agenda in order to combat any problem which might arise out of these issues.
Notice that about 3 questions that have come in already, which I will start directing to each of you. Before that, I just wanted to elaborate on what Jonathan requested me to do on what we are doing on the microfinance sectors. So HNB has a significant exposure amongst the private banks and amongst also the state banks in the country. A reasonably large exposure to the microfinance segment. We work at the bottom of the pyramid, and there have been 2 key areas that we have been supporting them with. One is the government has come up with a refinance scheme where they provide the finance, but we guarantee on working capital finance. So these are very, very small loans that are granted with an average ticket size of about $1 million. That's about, as low as, let's say, $500 per party. And this kind of loans just help them in terms of getting their business on the ground, restarted, just the working capital to be able to buy the stocks and be able to settle their debtors and also pay their salaries and to get them to restart. And another aspect that we have been driving in the bank is the HNB marketplace, where we try to connect our microfinance players with our customers, corporate banking, in SMEs, and help them in terms of creating supply chain linkages, both in terms of delivery, in terms of buyers, sellers, and a market. So those are 2 key areas we are focused on, because ultimately they really are the engine of the growth for the economy. So there's a lot of effort put in at the bottom of the pyramid to support them. There's a question quickly to Dr. Lin from Silva Obong. One of the measures as part of the business continuity management is the use of coupons. Could you please elaborate on the way the coupon system works? Because that is actually quite unique to Taiwan.
So, actually, this is not new for the government, because right now, actually, all the coupons should be in the digital way will be better. But this time, we secure use the paper coupon. That means people spend money to buy paper coupon, and they use the paper coupon to use in the stores. But the paper coupon is good for the small vendors and also the shops because they can accept the paper coupon. If you use the digital coupon for the small vendors or shops, they cannot have the way to receive it. That will be a problem. So actually, the paper coupon is good now, Sapir.
The next question, I'm going to go quickly, is from Yomal, where he's asking, how is it that many banks have used a lot of unconventional approaches during the crisis to be able to manage, working from home, digital adoption, futuristic work practices that were implemented. But how do you ensure that these practices are sustained post the crisis and that we don't waste the crisis? If there are certain things that we can adopt as part of our new normal working environments for the sustainable future.
I think, the longer the crisis continues, the more people will get used to that. We all would have wished for the crisis to be over rather quickly, and we probably would have gone back to our old habits of working. So if you try to find anything positive of the crisis dragging out, that probably may be it, that because this is now lasting much longer than everybody expected, people will start to really change their habits, will get used to working from home. I think it's a natural process. Having said that, I have to admit I'm not a big fan of working from home. It depends on what type you are. I can't be as productive at home as I can be in the office. I think at least bankers of my age, we're still how shall we call it, office creatures, and I really do miss the personal interaction with my team. Especially also if you have a dealing room, you want to exchange live information face to face. So I do think the change is here to stay. But I can't imagine us, moving to a complete remote or work from home environment.
I can empathize with you, Oliver. I mean, my wife complains that the children are also on the learning from home environment, and her job is to really supervise them, and that was a job previously done by the teachers. So, so these are challenges that we all have to get accustomed to. And one of the challenges we have, even at the bank, is to measure productivity and efficiency in a working from home environment. Particularly in areas where our jobs are very subjective and there is no sort of a piecework or a specific deliverable that can be identified. That's quite a challenge to ensure that people working from home are actually delivering on the outcomes that were expected. So I know, for example, my colleagues in the apparel industry for functions like merchandising, where their job is to actually get in the fabric and the trims on time for the lines to work, they do it quite well. But in banks, it's not something that we are really accustomed to. So I think the entire technology that enables effective tracking and ensuring deliverables are met needs to also be strengthened accordingly for us to really drive this going forward. Another question is on the acceleration of the digital transformation efforts and the fact that now banks will have to go head to head with the fintechs, and how is that panning out? So this is another discussion, another area that people are questioning.
Oh yes, if I may talk about this, in fact, in our bank, we have been very keen about this issue, and COVID-19 has been a driving force behind what we had started. For instance, we had started the digital KYC of our clients. and the government has issued, digital national ID cards for about 50% of the population. And we are trying to move toward the digital KYC and using biometric and facial recognition for this purpose. And in regards to the AI that I mentioned to you, in fact, we had started 2 projects which we are enhancing that project. One of them is the customer retention model. We are studying the customers who have left the bank to see what has been the trend of their activities, what has been their habits, in order to give prior notice to our branches and to the relationship manager in order to be aware of the activities of this client. We are enhancing that project, and this is working, this is going ahead very good. And other thing that we are trying to do to understand the customers' future needs. What are their future needs based on how they are spending the money, in which areas they are spending their money, and also using that information for acquiring new business clients into our banks. Because even though Peter Drucker says that you have to see who are not your customers, because if a country of 85 million, probably I have 4 million customers. It means 81 million are not banking with me. So Peter Drucker says, go to find them and bring them in. Not only we do that, in order to having the customer retention in the bank, so we are using these AI issues in order to enable us to provide better services to the clients and enhancing. In fact, this COVID-19 has enhanced, and we are putting more time and energy and budget in order to implement these projects.
So I guess the advantage the banks would have over fintechs is the availability of finance, because many of the venture capital and other financing sources that the fintechs were generally reliant on will be drying up quite a bit now. So that gives an advantage to the banks, but at the same time, the challenge is to really make the digital transformation work, because otherwise, in an environment where businesses are now operating without online, it would be difficult for them to really be able to cater to do the facilitation and the intermediation. So that would be a real area for banks to survive in the future. They will really need to up the ante on the digitalization efforts. Then there's another question from Angara Nage. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. A little bit more to elaborate. Maybe Oliver, you could come in here in terms of the BCP plan for departments as well as for systems. How does the BCP plan really get into action during a COVID pandemic? I think he's looking for some detail here.
Yeah, I think the BCP was or maybe is probably one of the most unloved documents in the bank. You get it once a year. You're supposed to read it, update it, know it, follow it. But to be honest, I think in the past a lot of people didn't take it very seriously, didn't read it. Here in Hong Kong, fortunately or unfortunately, we had to take it very seriously starting from last year. You know, we had protests here, which partly prevented us from reaching the office. Our staff could not come to the office. So there was an update across all Hong Kong banks on the BCPs already. And we went into the virus crisis with quite updated versions. What we had to do now in the virus crisis was that we suddenly had to factor in that not only we for example, we can't go to the office, but we also had to factor in that maybe half of your staff has been infected or has been in contact with infected people. So you may not only lose access to the office because the office has to be disinfected, but you also will have to operate with only 50% of your staff. So what we added to the BCP was basically was a split teams arrangement. We had to make sure that for every key function they had minimum 2 people, and these 2 people in a crisis situation are being put in 2 different teams, and these 2 different teams are physically separated. There should be no direct personal contact between the members of these teams. They can again use video, phone, or email, whatever, but they shouldn't meet. So we had to add and think about possibilities or potential problems which were simply not included in the BCP before. And I think the whole situation now has changed the attitude a bit. I can guarantee you that all my staff have read the BCP. It's really down to everybody to take that serious and to know what he or she has to do in such a crisis situation.
Yeah. So there were 2 areas I think that came in for our bank.
Let me say something about how to prepare for the new normal. Okay, for the new normal, I think in the future, the low interest rate will be for a long time, and the income equality will be a problem because even more rich. And the national debt, because of the COVID-19, the government spent a lot of money. So in the future, the high national debt will be also in a long period of time, and in the future maybe the tax will increase. All those things are not good for the young people. So what's the best investment for the country or even for a bank is how to help the young people. I mean, for the young people, they don't have much resources and they don't have much money. So how to help them? I think that the concept of the sharing economy will be good, because in the platform they can rent or they can get the resources to use in only marginal cost, like only small or little rent to pay. So for the young people, if they can use all the instruments from the platform, and they can use the sharing economy, all the techniques, then the young people can have a future. So I think the best investment is to create a platform for the sharing economy.
Yeah. If I may add about this business continuity plan, in our bank, we do have a plan A and a plan B. And nowadays, the banks who are very IT oriented, under this scenario, the disaster recovery plan or DRP plays a major role in that area as well. And we have invested a lot regarding that issue in order to have a continuous service to our clients. It is very costly, but it is essential and very needy in order to have a sound business continuity plan. And we have done lots of investment on this issue.
No, absolutely. And I just wanted to add that when it comes to BCP, DR, I think, as you said, Oliver, these were documents that was kept on the shelf and they were looked at. And the assumption was that we are ready only for a short period of uncertainty. But what COVID taught us was that there would be protracted periods where people need to work from home or we need to work from an alternate site. So we had to then revisit the whole assumption underlying BCP to prepare ourselves for protracted periods of time where you have a team A working from home and a team B working from office or from another site. So that was a challenge. And the second area would be in terms of having systems that can really move all the customer service systems that on online real time that require online real time interaction with customers, like the ATM switch, the digital wallets, the core banking system functionalities need to be ready offsite for immediate transition where required. So these were some of the investments that are necessary to strengthen the BCP and the DR. Another question that is coming in from Jigme Dorji is a practical question. Which digital channels are popular for availing banking services in case of a complete lockdown? For the panelist members to answer. What were the most popular digital channels?
In fact, we have worked on, as you mentioned, the digital wallet is something, and we do have a special apps in our bank that your digital wallet is in there. You can pay all your bills and do just some shoppings, and based on the money that you have kept in that digital wallet, this is something which not only we have done it, and we are also giving awareness to our clients in very, certain circumstances. If for some reasons the system were down, the communication was not on, this is the service that they can use, and it has been very popular, and they are using it. And it is not only just for the payments, we are trying to put more services for them in order to have, if they want to do, there are several applications on that they can use it. So you consider that as a solution.
Yeah. I mean, I can share with you, our experience has been the internet payment gateway had massive increases in volumes, the internet banking, mobile banking, and as Mustafa mentioned, peer-to-peer payments on the digital wallet, became very active. So many institutions, including supermarkets, really started using the digital channels for their business on a scale that they never anticipated before. So some of them actually faced embarrassing situations where they ran out of stocks, or they also ran out of capacity on their sites to be able to manage this kind of volume and traffic, and some of the sites even crashed. So the building that entire infrastructure around online shopping, online order taking, online provision of services became a huge activity, and many companies actually now started investing in internet payment gateways, websites. Merchants also have started onboarding on wallet and internet payment gateway sites as a result of this initiative. So I think for businesses, really, this has been a real eye-opener for them.
I think that the idea of online and offline together is also important, because you have all the information displayed online and all the service could be provided online. But for the personal contact, the offline is also important, because the temperature, the people-to-people talk, people-to-people contact is also important. But right now, of course, for the COVID-19, you should have the social distance, or you should keep the distance. The offline is a problem now, but in the future, after the pandemic are gone, I think people-to-people contact is also important. So not only online, we also need to focus on the offline. Thank you.
Okay, just another question. Populations must voluntarily observe measures to prevent spread, must act responsibly to avoid a health crisis. If not, scarce resources will be diverted and revival of economic activity will be delayed. How do we avoid this outcome and avoid compulsory measures? I think, if I may just start off the discussion, I think the cultural factors also play a big role in this, where countries like Taiwan, China are more adept to discipline than sometimes the more Western cultures, where there are human rights discussions in terms of what they should be told to be doing and what they should be doing, and that really came into pass during the COVID crisis. Maybe Oliver, you can elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think here in Hong Kong, the experience of SARS in 2003 is still very, very vivid in the memory of the people who went through that period. So when the first news of the virus came out in Hong Kong in January, actually most people in Hong Kong took measures themselves even before the government ordered measures to be taken. So it was, I think, a very responsible behavior of large parts of the population. I mean, wearing masks and voluntarily practicing social distancing, and that probably helped to keep the case numbers down here so much.
So I think leadership, military type precision in the way in which you activate this kind of discipline in the community does help. And countries that have really driven it very early and with a lot of decisiveness in terms of the communication have done better than the countries who are, dilly-dallying both ways and having too much of a democratic debate about what needs to be done and how soon.
Yeah, I think all the work in advance is important. I mean, if just like Oliver said, in Taiwan we have a similar experience like SARS in 2003. So people are willing to wear the mask because mask is important in the SARS and also right now in this virus situation. And also in Taiwan we have all the buildings, all the people. I mean, for transportation, public transportation, we check the temperature of people. Although this time is different from SARS. In the SARS, only the people that high temperature will be contagious. But this time is different. But still, if you have this kind of action, people get cautious and always prepare the cases. So I think to prepare something in advance is very important. And to wear the mask is the number one important.
Yeah, so we are into the last 10 minutes. I think we've exhausted all the questions. I would like to, close, if that's all right. Just would like to ask each panelist to come up with one learning that they would like to share with the audience for a bank, from a perspective of a bank, as to what they should be doing to prepare best practice based on the experiences that they have had for the last 6 months. Can we start with Oliver? Sorry for putting on the spot, Oliver.
No, that's okay. I think one key learning we had in our bank was that our staff, or people in general, are much more willing to take responsibility in a crisis situation than we anticipated before. Like when we split the team, basically you have to do the work for 2 people if half of the staff are off. And I think that was the experience across the bank, that the people really stepped forward, took responsibility, they helped each other out. It kind of brought the whole staff closer together. So if anything, that's definitely a positive outcome of the situation, and it brought out the, let's say, the entrepreneurial spirit in a lot of our colleagues, and that is what we definitely want to enhance and support in our bank.
Nothing like a good crisis to bring people together.
Yeah, true.
Mustafa?
Oh, yes. The first thing was that a positive reaction by our colleagues showed, as we mentioned, the sense of responsibility that they had. Second thing is that we came to the conclusion about the soundness of our policies regarding toward transformation of the bank toward digital banking. And this has been helping with us, because nowadays this digital banking is not a nice thing to have. It is a must. And we are happy to learn that this helped us in order to be able to provide better services and on-time services to our clients. And we will continue on this road that we have started and emphasize on digital banking as a means of new technology, and also having innovative programs in order to enhance the usage of these services. As I mentioned, use of AI in our future plans as we have already started.
Thank you, Mustafa.
Yes.
Dr. Lin?
Yeah, I think for my bank, this time we do learn a lot about how to help the government to help people to get their loan. As I mentioned, we have about 1/4 of all the applications in Taiwan. The reason we can do that is because we do it very quickly. We use AI to help the screen all the cases and them to respond very quickly. And another thing for me is to learn is actually it's not easy to do the economic forecast. At the first, even in March, in Wuhan, in the mainland China, the cases start the date January. But in the March, the economic forecast for IBM, even for the World Bank, is only about 0.1% of the economic decrease. Only up to April, they reduce the economic forecast a lot. But I mean, the economic forecast is not easy. Even right now, I mean, for the IHS, for those international forecasting companies, say Taiwan will be -1 or -2. But actually, right now, we feel our economy is quite normal. So we expect we will have at least 1.5% of the economic growth. So how to do the economic forecast actually is important, and maybe it's a good lesson for all the banks in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. And if I may also add, since I put you all on the spot, I need to also contribute. For us, it's about, I think, thinking in terms of scenarios. Look at everything in the form of scenarios. What is the most likely, what is the pessimistic, and what is the best case optimistic outcome. So that applies to whether it's liquidity, whether it is strategic planning, whether it's BCP. Think in terms of scenarios, because that has to be endemic in the way in which you operate. Because it's only then that you can actually get some idea about what you think could be the future. You cannot think, it's extremely uncertain to be able to make any kind of estimate, as Dr. Lin said, whether it's macroeconomic indicators or even your own KPIs in a bank. And planning in terms of scenarios helps a lot in that whole exercise. So I think in the absence of any other questions, we've had a whole host of questions that have been addressed by the audience that have been answered very well. Just want to thank all the panelists. I'm sorry we cannot give you certificates of appreciation, or we were not able to serve any refreshments to the panelists or the audience. But I think we were enriched by the knowledge that was shared by all of you. Really appreciate all the efforts that were put in, and the contribution that you have made on behalf of ABA. And I would also like to thank Amadou as well as Mig, who has been working around the clock, coordinating with each of us on our preparations for this program. And finally, thank very specially the audience for actively contributing to this session, for the many questions that you posed. I'm sorry if I have not been able to answer all the questions, but I'm sure you can always liaise through ABA, and these presentations that have been prepared by Dr. Lin and Mustafa Roy can be shared with you. If you get in touch with ABA, we can make arrangements to share it with the panelists. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure moderating this session.
Thank you so much. Thank you.